Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Nicole, and on today's episode, we're talking about young adults, particularly the struggles that some of them experience with transitioning into independent adulthood and how we can best support them. You maybe have heard the term failure to launch, which basically means that an individual who has the ability to move into independent adulthood has not yet been able to do so. And there can be a variety of reasons for that. And this term kind of gets thrown around with humor sometimes, but the reality is I am seeing more and more young adults in my practice who struggle to make this important life transition. And then also more and more parents and families who are really stuck and don't know what to do to be helpful or to move their adult child along in life. So whether you're currently in this situation with a young adult child, or you have younger kids and would like to try to prevent these issues later on, this episode is for you. My guest today is Alisa Foreman, and she specializes in these issues with young adults. Let me tell you a bit about her. She has a master's degree in marriage and family therapy from Phillips Graduate Institute. She has a strong passion for the field of psychology and supporting others on their life path through the power of therapy. She began her work at the California Counseling Center, providing therapy to children, adolescents, couples, and families. She's also served as a child therapist for the Los Angeles Unified School District, where she's conducted individual and group therapy at the elementary through high school levels. Alisa is the clinical director at Optimum Performance Institute and has been a part of that team for the past 11 years. She's enthusiastic about the work that she does there and the opportunity to help young adults on their journey to independence. She believes in the importance of finding joy and balance in life and building a healthy repertoire of skills to manage day-to-day life. And boy, can we all use more of that right now. When Alisa's not working, she's focused on her other passion, which is her family. She has a husband, 2 daughters, and 2 French bulldogs that she loves spending time with. Alisa, it's great to have you today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So we were talking a bit before we started the episode just about how many more young adults are having challenges with these issues and how much more prevalent, these things are than maybe even a decade or 2 decades ago. So we're going to get into lots of things around that. But I'd love to start by just having you share a little bit about your journey of what brought you to the specialty of really working with young adults and families who are trying to navigate this particular life transition.
Yeah, well, I started as an intern, and I was working at various schools with young children. I worked with elementary school, middle school, and some high school. And I really enjoyed that older population because they were beginning to sort of think about what is that next step and where am I going? And there's such a focus on the social piece, and there's dynamics within the family system that were coming up. And it just became something I was really interested in terms of not just working with that individual, but looking at the whole system, and then even the system within our society, and how are we as a society helping or hindering some of these adolescents and young adults in figuring out that path. And so when I had the opportunity to work at OPI, I really started to get very involved in that work. I enjoyed working with the young adults and being a part of that process and helping support and guide them, as well as really working closely with the parents too, to give them a lot of support and resources in terms of how do we navigate this next stage? How do we support our young adult? How do we balance giving them their independence with also still jumping in where they still need that help? And over the past 11 years, I just have continued to enjoy that work and had the opportunity to work with many young adults and really seen them be able to overcome some of those challenges and find that path for themselves. And so I think the successes of many of the young adults and their families that I've worked with has really kept me very motivated and engaged in the work that I'm doing, and keeps me doing it every day.
Fantastic. I'd love to have you share a bit for our listeners who are not familiar. Probably many people have not heard of OPI, but it's been around for a long time. It's a great program. I'd love to have you share a little bit about what it is that you do.
Yeah, OPI is a residential treatment program for young adults of all genders, ages 17 to about 28. And our goal is really to help them find that balance between the clinical work and the community integration. So we want to be helping them work through whatever emotional issues have been interfering with them being able to manage in life and day to day and cope with some of the stressors in life, while also getting them out into the community to try and explore different areas with the support in place to help them when they may hit a bump or struggle. And then our goal is really, how do you help them find balance? How do they figure out how to balance school and work and relationships and self-care and independent living skills, and really sort of keep all those balls in the air, as they're juggling life. And so it's a very phased approach where there's a lot of structure and supervision at the beginning. And then as they move through and they're learning more skills and able to take on more responsibility, we pull back. And it gives them that sense of confidence that they can do it more on their own. It also gives their parents that sense of confidence, sort of seeing them be able to take on more. And so by the time, they leave us, they have a sense of where they're headed. They have a plan. They have things they enjoy. They know the skills they're strong at. They know what their areas of challenge are that they may need to continue working on. And we look at really supporting that family system in terms of, what's gotten in the way in the past within the system, and how do we help reestablish this young child-parent relationship to an adult child-parent relationship with a lot more reciprocity, better communication and boundaries. So I think OPI has been around for 15 or 16 years, and it's just continued to evolve. And because we're located in LA, there's so many resources around us that our young adults can just go out and do whatever they're wanting to do to explore and really find their passions.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And there's, as I was saying to you before, I think that we would do well to have one of those types of programs in every community, because there's so many young adults who are struggling with this. And I want to delve into that a bit, about the factors that play into that. You've touched on, a couple of them, but one of the things that I think catches both young adults or older teens / young adults and parents by surprise is sort of this cliff that happens at the end of K-12 education, right? Where up until then, for the young person, their life has been structured externally, right? They've been told, like, this is what you do, you go to school. Like, there's so many things that are guiding and directing. And when 12th grade ends, and we're talking about for individuals who get that regular diploma where school services cut off, whether they've been in special education or not, they graduate, they're done. And now it's like, oh, wait, there's nobody telling me exactly what I need to do. Like, I need to figure this out. And I think that catches a lot of parents by surprise too, especially if their child has been receiving some services through the school system or elsewhere, and suddenly they go, oh, wait, we're now on our own. Like, I think that sort of service cliff, or that real shift that happens there, it's surprising for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And I think there's sort of two different paths. You have the ones that finish high school, and their expectation is you go to a four-year college, when that may not be the best fit for them. Their learning style, their interests, their skill set may not allow them to be successful in a four-year college. And so now they're sitting with, I should be doing this. This is what everybody else my age is doing, and yet it doesn't work for me. Or you have the ones that have a better understanding of maybe all of the different options, and they're sitting there completely overwhelmed by how many options are out there, and how do I possibly figure out how to narrow this down and find what works for me. And I think either way can be incredibly overwhelming and stressful for the young adult and the parents to begin to navigate that process and figure out the next steps.
So we've got this issue of, okay, suddenly we're in this phase of life where no one else, there's no set path, no one telling me what I need to do. We've also got a situation where now the supports and services that maybe were in place through K-12 education are gone. So people are left hanging. What are some of the other factors that you see that play into the challenges that young adults experience at this phase?
So I think there's, in our society, there's also been a lot of, for lack of a better word, coddling, enabling. We want to make our kids' lives easy, and so there's a lot of day-to-day independent living skills that many of our young adults are not receiving until they get to adulthood, and then they go, I don't know how to do my laundry. I don't know how to cook meals. I don't know how to go grocery shopping. I don't know how to budget. right? And so then they're thrown into adulthood, go live on your own with no skills to do so. So I always, when I talk to parents with younger children, I'm always talking about, make it fun, but teach them these skills along the way. Have them join you when you're cooking dinner. Have them help do the laundry, throw in the, separate the whites and the colors, or have them help you make the bed or sort the socks into pairs. Things where it's just building up their sense of confidence, and they're learning these life skills along the way, so it doesn't come and overwhelm them when they get to adulthood and now they have to start learning them. To give them a little bit more responsibility throughout, it really does positively impact the self-esteem, and it better prepares them.
Yeah, and I think we really tend to either just not think about it or underestimate the impact that not having those skills has on kids. I mean, the number of young adults that I have had just in tears in my office over the sheer overwhelm, even with going to a more structured environment like college, they're still in a dorm, or they're in an apartment, or they're in some kind of living situation, and mom or dad or the housekeeper or whoever is not there to direct and manage and pick up after them. So they get into these interpersonal dynamics around that stuff. Then with roommates, it's a problem. They just become overwhelmed by the magnitude of like, how do I process all these things? How do I, like physically, how do I go to the laundry machine and do this? But then also the bigger picture issue of how do I work that into my schedule? How often do I need to do this? When do I know when my laundry needs to be? I mean, all of these things. And I have had so many parents who say, well, they like, what's the big deal? Like they should just get that. And it's like, but if they haven't been taught that, and particularly I find if they have a history of having executive function challenges, of having neurodevelopmental issues, of having issues like anxiety or mood dysregulation or those things, oh boy, not being able to think through how to manage those daily life things on your own can totally snowball then for those kids.
Absolutely. Yeah, we see a lot of our young adults that, they've been woken up every morning living at home, and so waking up with an alarm and we focus a lot on the morning and the evening routines. How do you start yourself off on the right foot, and how do you sort of wrap the day up and prepare for the next day? Things like that, time management. How do you manage your day? Like you were saying, what's your routine? What's the structure that you're going to know? I go grocery shopping and do my laundry on Sundays, and then Tuesday nights I do this, and and that there's a sense of routine that just becomes habitual, so that it doesn't become something that all of a sudden everything's thrown at you at once. You start building it into your routine, and I think the more parents are including their children into those routines, the more prepared they are.
Yeah, you are talking about how sort of the term that we use, helicopter parenting, like not wanting to make things uncomfortable for our kids can lead to us not teaching them how to do these life skills and then lacking those. I think the other place where that shows up, that sort of helicoptering or that feeling like our job as a parent is to make sure our kids are never uncomfortable, where that shows up then is a real lack of resilience, of being able to navigate challenges. And, we've had Julie Lithcott-Hames on the show a couple of times. She's, written books about these issues and these transitions. And I think that's a big factor too. And I'm curious your sense of that, how parents being sort of overindulgent or overly concerned about kids staying comfortable throughout their childhoods impacts sort of the mental health or the resilience piece of that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a piece to it that almost appears like perfectionism in terms of I'm so used to being told I'm so great at everything. I'm so used to things going well that I hit a bump in the road and they decompensate. They can't tolerate the discomfort of I made a mistake. I got feedback that wasn't positive. I didn't get the job that I applied for. I didn't get an A on that test. And they drop the class, they quit the job, they can't tolerate the discomfort of imperfection. And so we get this very rigid black and white thinking of either I'm 100% successful and perfect at what I'm doing, or I'm not going to do it at all. And I think some of that is due to mental health issues and the way that their brains sort of operate in that very rigid way. And others is more of an environmental, how were they brought up? I think back to even when I was in elementary school, and, you know, it was a private school. And so everybody won, you know, everybody got a trophy and everybody won. And while it was lovely and it felt great as a kid, not everybody wins. And how do you tolerate losing? And how do you be a good sport? And how do you continue and push through and continue building your skills? And that's where that resilience comes in. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes we do them a disservice by trying to protect them from the upset or from, you know, the downfall of rejection or failure. But in the long run, we're not preparing them to be able to push through when life gets hard or things don't go our way.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're talking about that, I'm sort of thinking about my own experience, you know, in the clinic with young people and sort of mentally sorting into two categories as you're saying that, you know, there's, and I want to speak to this for a minute because I think we have parents listening who are, you know, maybe in one or the other of those categories. There's the kids who struggle at this life transition because they have a long history of challenges, right? They are struggling. Maybe they got through high school, maybe they got the diploma, but they really struggle with a lot of non-academic things, right? Like time management, like awareness, like social interaction, communication, like regulating their emotions and behaviors, all of that. But then there's this other category of kids who really seems to be sort of like on the ball and the perfect student, the athlete, like no identified issues, like on the honor roll, all of these things, probably some hints of some anxiety or stress management issues along the way, but really by and large, people would go, wow, great student, you know, solid in all areas of their life. And then they get to college and completely fall apart for exactly the reasons you're saying. And it is sort of these two groups. And yet a lot of the ways that we handle that are similar. I mean, the underlying things of what needs to happen there are similar, but I do want to spotlight that for parents listening, because I think it's the parents of kids who didn't have any struggles or didn't seem to have any issues all the way through that this is the most traumatic for. Right? For those kids and for those parents who are like, wait a second, this wasn't supposed to happen to me, or this wasn't supposed to happen to my kid. Like, what's going on here?
Right. Well, and you also have some family systems where there are very rigid rules, right? And boundaries. And so the young adult goes off to college, all of a sudden they have this newfound freedom and they run with it, right? And so they may get into substances, or they may really struggle with, you know, balancing life because they're really pushing up against these rigid boundaries that have been around them. Or you have the other extreme, which is there really haven't been clear boundaries. And so when they go to college, they don't know how to set their own. And it's very easy to sort of lose any type of structure or routine and hold themselves accountable to some of the things that they are responsible for now. So, you know, the biggest takeaway is just that balance in parenting, that balance in reinforcing the successes and allowing them to fail sometimes or make mistakes and supporting that process as well. And really just finding the balance in there so that when they launch, they're prepared mentally and emotionally to deal with both, to sort of sit in the middle and tolerate the discomfort of not doing well, and also be able to acknowledge and celebrate their successes along the way.
Yeah, the doing of both of that is so hard for so many kids. You touched on something else that I think is worth just spotlighting before we get into some strategies, and that is how our culture has evolved, or where we're at in broader, at least American, or I would even say globally more Western culture, with our expectations of what it means for a young person to be successful post high school, right? And for most kids grow up hearing the message that four-year college is what you need to do. Like, this is what everybody needs to do. Like, there's a certain path. And I think that has really done a tremendous disservice to a lot of kids, a lot of families, and even to our society for a lot of reasons. You know, I was listening to something yesterday from our local intermediate school district. begging kids, trying to get kids into the trades programs because we have such a shortage of, you know, those things. So we've really created some societal problems for ourselves with moving in that direction. But I see young people push up against that piece so often of, I know that's not right for me, or parents going, I know that four-year college and, you know, that type of thing is not the path for my kid, but the embarrassment, the shame, the worry, all of the stuff that goes around choosing something different, it's really profound.
Absolutely, especially at a time developmentally where they're trying to solidify their identity, right? And so they're comparing themselves to their peers, and, you know, they don't want to fall behind, and they don't want to take the path less, you know, traveled by when everyone else is doing. But I absolutely agree with you. I mean, there are so many phenomenal programs out there, certification programs, you know, vocation, trade schools. I mean, even, you know, we have young adults that are going to art school, they're going to culinary school, they're becoming auto mechanics, they're being, you know, computer techs, and they're finding something that works for them. It fits with their learning style, it fits with their lifestyle, it fits with their personality, it fits with their interpersonal styles of who are they going to be around every day. And that's where you really see them start to come into their own, because they finally have found something that they feel good about, they feel successful, they're passionate about it, they're feeling joy. And it is a very different path. So we do a lot of work, you know, sort of on the clinical end of what would it be like for you to go in this direction if this is really what you're wanting to do and you feel good about it, and how will you deal with that inner dialogue of, but it's different than everybody else, or I should be, you know, all the shoulds of what you should be doing at this age. But, you know, years ago when I was starting at OPI, it was even the idea of a gap year was like taboo, right? It's not okay to take a gap year. And now it's become a very accepted thing, because sometimes young adults need some time to get out there and explore. Maybe they need to get a job to really figure out, do I want to go back to school? And what would I go back to school for? And if I don't, then can I move up in this career and make a career for myself? You know, so sometimes they need that time to really figure things out without feeling like, I finished high school, I got to go to college, and sort of the rigidity of that process.
So as we get into thinking about what parents can be doing to support kids in this situation, both proactively, but also reactively if they find themselves there, it sounds like this is a big piece of it, of parents needing to be aware of, you know, our own internal dialogue, expectations, programming, and then really embrace being more flexible and focused on the path of success for this kid, and not necessarily, you know, the quote unquote norm that's out there, right?
Yes, and I think it's a family process, right? The parents really have to look at, what are my expectations, and is that reasonable for my child? You know, who is my child, and what are their skills? What are they good at? And what's going to lead them to a happy, successful life? And it may be a very different path than they themselves took, or that their other few children have taken, right? We see a lot of families where, well, 3 of our kids went to college and he's just not going to. And how do they tolerate that? And well, but he's a very talented musician and could go pursue music at the, you know, and get the educational background and pursue that and make a career for himself. And it would make him happy and he could be successful, but it's a very different path than the rest of the family have taken. So supporting them, and sort of, you know, sometimes it's even grieving the loss of what they thought would be for their young adults. And then really providing the space for their young adult to say, this is what I want to do, this is what I think is going to work for me, and finding the best way to support them down that path.
What else do you think is important as you talk to parents and families about how they can help kids in this situation? Because I think certainly, and you've touched on it many times in this discussion already, it's a family affair. It's a family issue. When you have a young adult, whether it's a, you know, 18-year-old or a 26-year-old or whatever it might be, you know, still living in your home that you're supporting and really struggling to move them forward on a path for themselves. And there can be varying degrees within there, right? Of how much the young adult is contributing to the functioning of, you know, the household, how engaged they are in life in general. I mean, we see everything from parents who come in and say, my 25-year-old pretty much refuses, you know, to get out of bed and do anything, makes messes all the time, eats our food, disrespects our rules, and does, you know, whatever he wants, and we don't know what to do about it, all the way to, you know, young people who are living in their parents' home who are really trying, really engaged in day-to-day life, but just can't figure it out, and everything in between, right? So, so what are some of the things that are important for parents to be thinking about or implementing on their side of things, recognizing that there's nothing they can do to control their kid?
Right. Well, I think first and foremost, we want to really look to address any mental health issues, right? If your young adult is at home because their anxiety is intolerable, their depression is intolerable, they cannot get themselves out of bed, they cannot face the world because of the anxiety, they are struggling with something that really is interfering. We want to address that piece first, because we want to make sure they are in a place where they can handle the next steps, and that they will be able to tolerate and push through that. So that's a really important piece of starting off with. And then from there, I think, you know, making sure they have a sense of responsibility, making sure they have a sense of accountability, making sure that there are very clear boundaries within the family system. What will the parents and the family tolerate? What's okay within this house and what's not okay? And where is that line? Because I think sometimes it's really hard, you know, you don't want to upset your kid, or you feel bad they're struggling to get up, and yet how do you make it clear that they need to be out of the house during the day, and they need to be up at 10 a.m. and they need to be applying to this many jobs a day, or they need to be going to the grocery store or doing the laundry for the family? Or, you know, I talk a lot about having the young adults do those independent living skills, whether it's for themselves or for the family while they're living at home, right? So you can live here, but maybe you need to pay us some rent. And so you may need to get a job to pay some rent. It won't be as if you're renting your own apartment, but you need to contribute because you're staying here and you're an adult. You know, you need to do your laundry. You need to do grocery shopping. Maybe you're responsible for cooking dinner 1 or 2 nights a week. So how do we build in some structure, some boundaries, some responsibilities while they are at home, so that it's not just a free pass to do nothing, because we're not setting them up to take the steps to launch, right? We're just sort of allowing them to wallow in it or stay stuck. And through giving them these steps, they're getting unstuck. They're moving forward. They're taking certain steps during the day that's setting them up to then take that next step. So I feel like it's the baby steps building up to the bigger steps outside of the home.
I think the piece there that's so critical too that you touched on is the development of a sense of competence. You know, one of the things that I see in so many of these young adults is they lack any sense of personal competence, of being able to handle anything or being able to be good at or do anything. And so, you know, I have parents who will say, well, it feels mean to me. I mean, he's struggling, you know, I'm going to tell him he has to do the laundry for the family. And it's like, no, you need to flip that around and look at, he needs an opportunity to feel competent. No human being ever felt competent and good about themselves lying around doing nothing all day, right? That's just not how it works. And so I think that reframing for families, you know, as you're talking about, like really like, no, these boundaries, these expectations, these discussions around what you are going to be doing is really important, because that's what's going to move you through this. You need to have opportunities to feel capable.
Right. It also creates a sense of safety and security. You know, I know what to expect. I know what's expected of me. And I know where those lines are, so that I don't cross them. So it really provides some structure and some comfort around them to know, you know, where those lines are, versus not having it at all. And I don't know what's coming my way, and I don't know what to expect. And, you know, it's more unpredictable, and that creates a lot of anxiety. So I find that the families that have those boundaries, the young adults respond well. They need structure. That's one of the biggest pieces that we see within our program. When they get to us, the parents say they've been laying around all day. They don't get up and out of bed. They come to our program. They're up in the morning. They're at the office at 9 o'clock. Well, there's structure. There's someone counting on them to show up. there's someone, saying, hey, let's go, and there's that piece of encouragement and just, this is what the expectation is. These are the boundaries of the program. You need to get up and show up. And they respond well to that because they crave that structure.
Yeah. And I think for parents who are listening, who are saying, well, that's great if I could send my child to a residential program,
Right.
to have somebody else do that. But I do want to spotlight that is the benefit of having a skilled professional involved. It doesn't have to be a residential program.
No.
The residential programs are wonderful and very necessary for some individuals, but the reality is you just need to partner with somebody who's a third party outside of your family system who can help you communicate about this together and create the structure and have some accountability. In the families that I work with, that's me as a therapist, as the psychologist. But we have done that in different ways with families. It could be a community mentor. It can be, just the value of having someone who's not mom or dad, who can come into that mix, somebody that they are accountable to, or somebody who's helping them with that. So I don't want people to get discouraged and think, well, okay, if I can't send my kid to a residential program. No, there are ways to do this.
Absolutely.
And it can be very successful.
And we always want to take, the lesser approach in terms of, residential treatment is not necessary for everybody. And so we always want to start within the family and who can support the family and the young adult and who can help, lay out that structure that everybody can follow. And then who's everyone going to be accountable to in terms of, did you follow what we talked about? So I think it puts a little responsibility on everybody because we also don't want the young adult to feel like they're the problem, they're the issue. This is a system. This is a systemic issue, and everyone needs support, and everyone may need to shift the way that they're approaching this family in order to create a healthier family and healthier dynamics. I also think really working on communication. Can you communicate with your young adult when they're struggling? Will they let you in and tell you? Can you be direct in terms of, how hard it is to see them not be able to get up in the morning? And, I'd like you up by 9 o'clock and let's go for a walk every morning. We can talk, we can, connect in the morning. We'll get a little exercise. It will be time for us. So using the relationship to really help motivate as well, investing in that time with them, that connection. But that communication, that open communication, I think is so important too. You see a lot of parents that are afraid to say something, or the young adult, shuts the parents out and doesn't want to communicate. And so, I'm always talking about, how do we open the lines of communication? You don't have to share everything with your parents or with your child, but how do we be able to express ourselves, what we're feeling, what's working and what's not working, so that we as a system can shift when necessary.
And I love what you're saying there too about relationship as the foundation for that. And sometimes, especially with kids now in that adult age range, there's just there's a lot of like, just do this, just do the things you need to do. And it's like backing up and saying, okay, let's start with relationship first. Let's focus on, what the goal isn't going to be to get a job today. The goal is going to be, let's just put on our tennis shoes together and go out and sit on the patio together for 10 minutes or go for a walk. That really, there often needs to be a recalibrating of what the focus should be, at least initially, especially if you have a young adult who literally is not engaged in life, to say to them, well, in order to stay here, you're going to need to go find a job in the next 2 days. It's like that's not going to happen.
No. And I think, to have that action partner, I'm not just saying you go do this. Let's do this together. I'll be with you. It'll be a shared time together. I'll support you. We'll both benefit from it, but you're not alone in this. I'm not going to do it for you, but I will be there with you while we're doing this. And I think that can really help not only the relationship, but really get some of that motivation in terms of, I have this support. It's not being forced onto me. It's not just an expectation, but someone who's willing to participate in it with me. And that always seems to feel a lot better, and sometimes it's a parent, and sometimes, it's a life coach or a mentor or somebody else, where it's just joining in that process versus feeling like I'm alone in this, trying to navigate.
It's a great point, because feeling lonely or isolated, or, whatever word we want to use for that, is like compounds the whole issue, right? Whenever we
Absolutely.
feel totally out there, hanging out there on our own, like we're all alone, that makes everything worse. So I love that focus on like, we can do this. And, I was thinking as you were talking about that, you said, I'm not going to do it for you, but I'll do it with you. Right. And so I'm thinking, even on a very tangible level, whether we're talking to parents of younger kids who want to be proactive about trying to prevent this, or we're talking about parents who are currently in this situation, I think that's an important concept, right? Of not continuing to do for your child what they can do for themselves. Like, you can be a partner in that. And I'm thinking particularly about things like phone calls, or, my mind is going back to years ago, to the mom of a 24-year-old, totally cognitively intact, regular diploma, all of that. He wanted pizza all the time. She wanted him to eat healthy. She would call the delivery people to order the pizza to have it delivered, because he was like, I'm anxious, I can't make the phone call. And this was just a pattern that had gone on. And I pointed out, well, okay, you want him to eat healthy. He wants pizza. You're making the phone call to do it because he's like, what could we shift here, right? Like, okay, you want to order pizza and use your own money. I'm not going to stop you, but you're going to have to make that call, right? And I can stay there. I can help you. I can encourage you. But like things like that, right? Like not doing for kids what they can either learn to do for themselves or are capable of doing for themselves.
Absolutely. And you also bring up, that point of making phone calls, and, with technology nowadays, I mean, some of these young adults that they text and they email and they play video games and socialize through the computer, they really don't have the skills to go on a face-to-face interview. They don't know how to make a phone call to schedule an appointment. They don't know how to do some of those things. And so modeling it for them, supporting them through it, role playing ahead of time. Okay, let's role play. You're about to call and make a doctor's appointment. What are you going to ask? What's your availability? What are you going to tell them the symptoms are? And walking them through and prepping them so that they can build the skills to do that. We do a lot of role playing for job interviews. What are you going to say when they say, why do you want this job? How are you going to present yourself? What are your strengths? And so modeling and role playing a lot of those experiences. And I also encourage parents to share their own experiences. Everyone had some ups and downs when it came to launching, and it came to getting your first job, or dating, or, doing laundry for the first time. And so any stories that you can share that normalizes the process of it, I think it just alleviates some of that stress and anxiety, and again allows them to connect. My mom had a hard time launching too. She couldn't figure out which school to go to, or my dad threw a red shirt and a white load of laundry when he went to college and everything turned pink. This stuff happens. It normalizes mistakes. It normalizes, it's permission to be human. And I think so many of these young adults just need to also feel like, hey, this is a normal process, and you're going through it right now. And so it feels really intense, but everyone has their challenges along the way. And I think those are also fun moments to sort of, think of your parents in terms of them making mistakes too. Like that's a big thing for some of our young adults. You mean you weren't always, a successful doctor? No, I couldn't do laundry, and I can't, that was something that I really had to work towards. And so, it helps the process a little bit, adds a little levity too.
It's great. Love that. So powerful and simple, but powerful, right? And one of those things that we don't necessarily think about, like, oh, sharing my own feelings or my own experience at that age. But it has such a positive impact on them. As we wrap up here, any other words of wisdom, advice, tips, things that you feel like, whether it's the parent of a young kid now who's going, oh man, I really want to try to, avoid this issue, or somebody who's there, like any last pieces of advice or wisdom?
The last piece that I would speak to is, regardless of how old your child is or what phase of life, having a strong, what I call tool belt of coping skills, I think is really important. How do you manage the stressors of day-to-day life? How do you keep yourself regulated in a stressful situation? How do you tolerate, and push through challenge? How do you deal interpersonally? How do you decompress at the end of the day and self-soothe and make sure you're taking care of yourself? When is it important to just distract and totally do something to take your mind off what you're doing? And so really helping teach those, modeling them, doing them together again. You know what, you seem like you're getting really anxious. Let's take some deep breaths together, or let's go splash some cold water on our face, or let's go for a walk, or let's put on a comedy and just sort of distract for a little while. So how are they, building skills that are going to allow them to get through some of the emotional stuff that's coming up? And again, who's modeling it for them and who's helping teach those skills? And, again, it can be anybody, right? There are a lot of different forms of treatments or theories or that just have really nice ways of packaging them, but coping skills have been around forever. And so it really doesn't matter what you call it or where it came from, who created it, but everyone needs to have skills that they can turn to in a moment to be able to sort of manage and keep themselves at a level that's tolerable in order to deal with the trials and tribulations of life. And that's a really important piece that, we want to arm them with the skills to be able to do that before they're sent out into the world. We want to make sure they're prepared.
Yeah, so right on, so important, and something that no matter what the age of your child right now, you can be having an eye towards that, whether it's the challenges with a 3-year-old or the challenges with a 30-year-old, how can we build that tool belt, as you said, of coping skills, so valuable. I want to make sure that people know where they can find out more about you and OPI and the work that you're doing.
OPI is in Woodland Hills, California. I can give my email address if that's helpful.
You just go ahead and get the website. We'll put it in the show notes too, but for people who are just listening, what's the website? So it's
www.optimumperformanceinstitute.com, and all of our information is on there. And yeah, I'd be happy to speak to anybody further. We have visits all the time for families and young adults. And we have residential and outpatient services. So depending on what the needs are, I also have a private practice on the side where I work with young adults and their families if residential treatment's not appropriate. And so, I would love to be a support to anybody who's going through this process and would like more information or just to consult a little bit.
Fantastic. Is there a website for the work that you do privately?
I don't have a website at the moment.
Okay, yeah. We will make sure that we put the link in the show notes. And what I will say also is that the OPI website has a lot of great resources. Even if you're thinking, I don't live in California, I'm not going to send my child to residential treatment, there are wonderful audios, videos, articles, all kinds of things there that can just provide some good insights and strategies and things. So I definitely encourage people to check that out. Alisa, this was such a great conversation, such an important topic. And I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. It was so nice. And I love talking about this topic. I'm super passionate about it. So it was just a pleasure to do this and be a part of it.
Thank you so much. And thanks as always to all of you for listening. We will catch you back here for our next episode of the Better Behavior Show.